Now, the Trump administration has scrapped a landmark scientific finding that formed the legal basis for federal controls on greenhouse gas emissions, known as the Endangerment Finding. The 2009 scientific determination classified carbon dioxide, methane and several other gases as threats to public health. Its repeal could pave the way for the elimination of broader climate regulations on cars, power plants, oil and gas facilities. The move by the Environmental Protection Agency marks this administration's most sweeping effort to try and roll back US climate regulations. President Trump is framing the reversal as a way to cut red tape and reduce costs for American consumers. Well, let's pick this up with Michael Gerrad. He's a professor of environmental law at Columbia University in New York City. Welcome to DW. Lots of us are looking at this a bit puzzled and say, well, if the scientific evidence says methane, carbon dioxide and all these other gases are bad for our health and for the climate, explain to us how a government agency can just turn around and say, well, no, it isn't.
The administration is not denying that climate change is bad for health of the environment, but they're saying that the Clean Air Act enacted by Congress does not give EPA the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. So they're relying purely on a legal argument.
Right. And you're the environmental lawyer. Are they right?
I don't think so. In 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court issued an important decision called Massachusetts versus EPA, saying that the Clean Air Act does apply to greenhouse gases if EPA determines that they are they cause a danger. So EPA did that in 2009, found that there was endangerment caused by greenhouse gases. There was at the time a ton of scientific evidence showing that. There's now 10 tons of scientific evidence showing that. So I don't think they can do that.
So if they do it, what will that repeal mean in practical terms?
It means that we will no longer have the standards for clean automobiles and trucks. Those will go away for the greenhouse gas emissions. It also means that the government cannot regulate greenhouse gases from power plants, from factories, from oil and methane sources, from airplanes, from all kinds of other sources.
All right. And so presumably then this is going to end up in court. The states and all sorts of people are going to try and repeal the repeal.
That's right. There will be lawsuits brought very quickly in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit.
You've written, though, that revoking this greenhouse gas endangerment finding is not a simple matter. Can you briefly explain the tangle of legal issues you've written about to us non-lawyers?
There's a big question about whether the EPA has the discretion to make this decision in view of the Massachusetts decision from the U.S. Supreme Court in 2007. There are a number of arguments on both sides, but the administrative procedures that are required to go through are very complicated. The litigation will also address whether EPA followed all the necessary procedures in doing what it's doing.
OK, so the Ford Motor Company has welcomed this move. What will the lifting of these restrictions mean for car manufacturers who have already spent billions getting ready to build cleaner cars, particularly in export markets where we're taking these issues more seriously?
That's right. The U.S. auto industry is really in a very difficult position. As you said, they spent many billions of dollars getting ready to build electric cars, but then the U.S. reversed much of the policy, took away a lot of the tax incentives and other ways to encourage that. Now there is taking away some of the greenhouse gas emission standards, but that will be challenged in court. We don't know how that's going to turn out. Meanwhile, the world market is being flooded by Chinese electric vehicles that are very good and very inexpensive. We can't bring them to the U.S. because of the tariff. So the U.S. auto industry is in danger of really being isolated.
Right. Thank you for talking us through that, Professor. Professor Michael Gerrad from Columbia University.
OK, we are joined now by Joseph Goffman. He is a former assistant administrator with the US Environmental Protection Agency, and he's joining us from Washington, D.C. It's great to see you. Joseph, how does a government agency that's in charge of protecting the environment justify this kind of repeal?
Well, Well, they did this using a sleight of hand. They're making a very narrow, somewhat obscure legal argument about whether or not they have the authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. And in doing so, they're sidestepping the main issue, which is the strength of the science that climate change presents a real threat to human health and the environment.
What does it mean in practical terms? What does it change for American people? And will there be a legal challenge?
To answer your second question first, there will definitely be legal challenges from citizens groups and also from attorneys general in states like, I'm going to guess, Massachusetts, California, and New York. This is devastating for Americans because with this action, they're taking away a rule addressing greenhouse gas emissions from cars and trucks. If that rule stayed in place, Americans would see billions of tons of reduction in CO2. They would have seen millions of tons in reductions of the pollutants that make people sick. They would have seen significant savings in terms of fuel costs and operating costs for their vehicles. And they would have had a lot more choice in terms of the vehicles they could purchase. Now, the president has built a wall, if you will, locking Americans into dirtier transportation and locking us out of cheaper, cleaner electric and hybrid electric vehicles.
So Trump says it's going to sort of unleash industry. What does the lifting of these restrictions mean for US car makers? Can that happen?
Well, as many as 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, major American auto manufacturers were making billions of tons of investment in producing electric vehicles, retooling their factories, investing in battery technology and charging technology. Now those investments have really been snatched away from the automakers. Now, I think you probably know that the auto manufacturing industry is a global business. So American companies are facing tremendous cross pressures because so many other markets, particularly the EU market and certainly China, those markets are shifting steadily away from gasoline-powered cars to electric vehicles.
Outside of cars, how out of step does this make America with the rest of the world and the sort of green transition?
Completely out of step. You sort of, again, have to think of this as just another brick in the wall that Trump is building to lock Americans into a fossil fuel future using old, out-of-date, more expensive technologies, sacrificing our opportunity to use new, truly 21st century, cleaner, and in many cases, cheaper technologies. This is a real backwards move that the president is dragging all of us into.
Joseph Goffman, thank you so much for joining us on DW. It's great to get your insights.